Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Honourable members, I respectfully acknowledge that today we are sitting on the land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I thank them as First Australians for their careful custodianship of the land over countless generations. We are very fortunate in this country of ours to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. I'd like to welcome you to the first Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament here in Cairns. This is the first Indigenous Youth Parliament we've held for primary school aged students anywhere in Queensland, and it was very fitting, of course, that we did that right here in far north Queensland. I want to thank the teachers who've helped students with their preparations and the parents who've supported them, and I'll talk a bit more about that in making my closing remarks. But to say that this is a momentous occasion would be an understatement. It is fantastic that you're able to be here today, and we hope that we're able to do many more of these. We've got students from more than 20 schools represented, from students from schools such as Gordonvale, Isabella, going through to Bentley Park, right through the regions around Cairns and going up to Cooktown, and of course going even into the Torres Strait. It is very pleasing to see. Very pleased indeed that you're able to be part of this very important Parliament here today. Also, as a Speaker of the Parliament who lives in far north Queensland, and as a Member of Parliament now in my fourth term, it always is a bit sad when I watch Parliament in session and we see school groups coming in and they're all from South East Queensland. So of course what it means is we want to ensure that students, no matter where they live in Queensland, can have some opportunity to engage with the Parliament, to understand our parliamentary democracy, and to ensure that they know that they have a place in it. So with those opening remarks, I call the Youth Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am honoured to stand here today as your Youth Premier and offer my vision for the state of Queensland. Assembled before me today are the future leaders of this great state, and I ask the question, how are they preparing for this important role? I need only look at our own school's vision, and I believe that it could be applied to the Sunshine State, our home. It states, our students are excited about today, can't wait for tomorrow, and are prepared for what's coming next, the peak for each child. Let's substitute and say that every Queenslander is excited about today. In other words, there are experiences and opportunities available to each and every one of us if we wish to enhance our lives. Let's continue. Every Queenslander can't wait for tomorrow, which means we have a purpose and goals to reach today and tomorrow. To round off the vision, it would state, every Queenslander is prepared for what's coming next. In other words, every Queenslander can look forward to a prosperous future if they are prepared to work hard and put effort into their goals. On a personal note, I feel that I have taken the first step in my vision for life by being elected student leader this year. The confidence and persistence that I have experienced this year will help me achieve well into the future. I am truly inspired by a quote from an unknown author which captures the vision I would like for Queensland. Vision precedes purpose, fuels hard work, and yields success. Let's make it great in the Sunshine State. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the Youth Leader for the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My vision for Queensland is that there is no more plastic in our supermarkets. This includes plastic milk bottles, food packaging, and plastic bags. Today I'll be discussing the problems this causes and how we can fix it. Firstly, I want to raise awareness about plastic milk bottles. In the past, plastic milk bottles did not exist. A milkman would come around to houses and replace used glass bottles with milk with fresh ones. I know if we went back to doing this system, it would reduce the plastic we are using. Secondly, food packaging uses a lot of our plastic, which is only used for a short time. We usually just open the packet and use what's inside before throwing it in the bin, and sometimes people can't be bothered to do that and litter. There are many solutions to this problem, such as replacing them with recycled paper, cardboard, tins, and fabric. Finally, I want to talk about the new plastic bags. This was originally meant to fix the problem caused by soft plastic bags. However, they have only made the matter worse. Sure, they're thicker so they won't break as easy, but if one of these were to be littered, it would take twice as long to break down, making it a very serious issue for sea life. Alternatives include using paper bags or fabric bags instead. I hope you realize the effects that each and every person has on the environment. By making simple changes like using glass milk bottles, recycled paper packaging, and fabric shopping bags can all make a difference and ultimately make Queensland a better place for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Member. Before moving on to the next item of business, I want to acknowledge that we all have two Deputy Speakers today in the form of the Member for Cairns, Michael Healy MP, and the Member for Hill, Shane Canute. I'll thank them in advance, and I trust that you'll show them the same courtesies as you showed me as Speaker. We'll start into our debate, and then we'll have one of the Deputy Speakers picking up and going through those series of speeches shortly. I call the Youth Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House place on record its appreciation of the contribution made to our state and nation by various eminent Indigenous Australians.
The question is that the motion moved by the Premier be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against no. I think the ayes have it. I call the Youth Member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the story of Willowware Bennelong, who lived from 1764 to 1813. Bennelong was an Aboriginal man who was captured in November 1789 and brought to the settlement at Sydney Cove. To that, the Governor Arthur Phillip could learn about the customs and language of his people. A few months after, he escaped and wasn't seen again for a while. In 1971, a brick hut was built for him on the eastern point of Sydney Cove, now called Bennelong Point. In 1792, he sailed to England with Arthur Phillip to meet King George III. He didn't return to Australia for over 2 years, which made him really sad. Once he returned, he unfortunately didn't feel fully accepted by the white people or his own countrymen. He was a peacemaker during his life, and in 1813 he died at Kissing Point. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Remember, members, you're able to encourage your fellow members of Parliament by giving a good hear, hear when they make a great statement to the House. I call the Youth Member for Milroy. Call the Youth Member for Deerell. The Youth Member for Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today my topic is about Lionel Morgan, who was born on August the 12th.
Member, if you could just pull your microphone down so that the room is able to hear you. Thank you. Order.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today my topic today is about Lionel Morgan, who was born on August the 12th, 1938. He was the first Indigenous Australian to represent our nation at an international rugby league test match. Morgan primarily played on the wing. In 1962, he was named Queensland Best Back. During Morgan's football career, he was subject to racism. One major incident was in a test match against Ipswich, where he was tackled over the sideline and the whole Ipswich team jumped on top of him, resulting in him going to hospital. Morgan was continued his passion for rugby league throughout his lifetime. Morgan is an inspirational to all for his dedication and passion towards the game. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Dingo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, folks. I am member for Dingo and I present the following details for you. My name is Ernest Ashley Dingo, or Ernie Dingo for short. I was born on 31st of July 1956 at Dulladu Station. That's in WA. I am the second child of 9, including 3 brothers and 5 sisters. That's a big mob of us. I grew up in Mullawa and went to Prospect Primary and then Geraldton High School. I liked PE at school and got pretty good at playing basketball. Even went to Perth and played state league first division for the East Perth Hawks. Not bad for a short bloke like me. Later I met this bloke called Richard Wally, who asked me to help him write a welcome to country ceremony for some visiting island dancers who would not perform until they were welcomed onto our land. True respect, that was. I then got into television and acting. I love comedy, acting, and have worked on movies like The Fringe, Dwellers, Cappuccino, Until the End of the World, Blackfellas, Dead Heart, Crocodile Dundee, and Blind New Day. But it's promoting for Indigenous equality that first my heart. I don't think they understand. It upsets me a lot that people talk and make decisions without asking. Restrictions are not equality. They are enforced laws by people who don't understand. Our problem is learning how to say no when others want you to say yes. If it's not good in here, then don't do it. Simple. Well, I've taken enough of your time for now, so thanks and go the Eagles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before calling the next member, I want to acknowledge that we also have our third Deputy Speaker here, the Honourable Craig Crawford, MP, Member for Barron River and Minister for Fire and Emergency Services. I call the youth member for Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share the story of Sir Douglas Welch Nichols. He was born on 9th December 1906 at an Aboriginal mission on the land of his people, the Yotto Yotto people. As a young boy, he witnessed his sister's forced removal by government authorities. He left school at the age of 14 when the Aborigines Protection Board forced him to leave his home and find work. After a stellar sporting career, Nichols enlisted in the military in 1941. In 1942, Nichols married, and together he and his wife worked tirelessly to improve conditions for their people. In 1976, he was appointed Governor of South Australia. However, he gave up his governorship in 1977. Following a stroke, Nichols died on 4th June 1988. In his lifetime, Nichols overcame the drama of losing his sister as well as experiencing racism. He went on to have an incredible career as a professional sportsman and leader, running boxing, football, a champion in everything. Add to the list pastor, activist, or something, Father of the Year and Governor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I now call on the member for Goodies. Not here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the story of Adam Goodes. Adam Goodes was a champion AFL player with the Sydney Swans, winning 2 Brownlow medals and 2 premierships, and is a 4-time All-Australian member of the Indigenous Team of the Century. In 2014, he was named Australian of the Year. Adam is proud of his Indigenous heritage and is actively involved with several Indigenous sports and community programs, including working with those in youth detention centres. He helped establish the Go Foundation, which empowers Indigenous role models in education, employment, and a healthy lifestyle. Adam Goodes is sickened that Indigenous children are 3 times more likely to fail minimum standards in literacy and numeracy tests than non-Indigenous children. He has labelled low literacy rates as unacceptable and calls for more funding and training for early education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I now call the youth member for Noonacool.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the story of Kath Walker. Kath Walker, also known as Udru Noonacool, was born on the 3rd of November 1920. Her parents were named Edward and Lucy. She had 6 siblings. She took many different paths in life, including being the politician, advocate, artist, and educator. She was a campaigner for Aboriginal rights. However, she was best known for her poetry in was first Aboriginal Australian to publish a book of verse. Kath Walker won many awards, including the Mary Gilmore Prize for Literacy, and as well as Fellowship in Australian Writers Award. She also received an International Acting Award. Oodgeroo Noonuccal passed away on the 16th of September 1993, aged 72. She will be remembered as a very talented, inspiring female Indigenous leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Before I call the member for Goolagong, I just asked all speakers to speak and to the microphone and add a bit of strength so all the Youth Parliament representatives can hear. And I say that because that was what once the speaker said to me when I delivered my first speech. So you're not in trouble. I call the member for Goolagong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to inform the House of Yvonne Goolagong. Yvonne Goolagong was world number 1 tennis player. She was one of the world's leading players in the 1970s and the early 1980s. Miss Goolagong Cowley won 14 Grand Slam titles. Before she was famous, Aboriginals weren't allowed to play tennis until her kindly neighbour Bill Kurtzman introduced her to the game. Once she retired from tennis, she started doing Indigenous tennis programs around Australia with children between the ages of 5 to 15. And some of the programs are the EGF program, Come and Try Day, and tennis camps. Yvonne Goolagong is an outstanding role model to all children. She inspires them to believe in their dreams, and I strongly believe that there should be more Indigenous role models around Australia because they can help kids set life goals and achieve their goals, and also to believe in themselves and their own abilities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for O'Shane. The member O'Shane's not here?
Correct,
sir. Okay, I'll call the member for Mabo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Eddie Mabo was an Indigenous Australian man from the Murray Island, also traditionally known as Mayor, in the Torres Strait Islands. He is known for his active role in gaining rights for Indigenous people. I can say that the story of this humble man who remained courageous and stood up for his beliefs right to the end is truly inspiring. After an epic 10 years of court cases, Australian law about land ownership was changed forever, thanks to Eddie Mabo and his team of Indigenous land right activists. Sadly, Eddie died in 1992, and 3 years later, a traditional ceremony for such a respected man was held on his beloved homeland of Mayor. This type of ceremony had not been seen on the island for over 80 years. Mabo Day is an official holiday in the Torres Straits, celebrated on the 3rd of June each year. This is a wonderful tribute to Eddie Mabo and his team's persistence and determination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Salem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and honourable members. My name is Olivia Tapham, and today I'll be talking to you about the inspirational nurse practitioner, Leslie Salem. Leslie Salem is a nurse practitioner from the Wanneroo Nation in New South Wales. Leslie works in the Hunter, New England Area Health Service, where she specialises in chronic disease, in particular kidney health. Leslie enjoys mentoring, and she strongly believes in sharing knowledge. Leslie has been a keynote speaker for many different organisations, with a career highlight being named Australian Nurse Practitioner of the Year in 2015. In addition to her career highlights, Leslie is also a flourishing Indigenous artist whose works feature in regional galleries and on health literature. Leslie is a role model for Indigenous people across the nation. She had a dream and she worked hard to achieve it. Leslie should be an inspiration to us all because she has found a way to combine her cultural knowledge into her working profession. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Australia's first Indigenous barrister and the second Aboriginal person to represent his country in rugby union, Lloyd McDermott can be considered a high achiever. Born in the small Queensland town of Eidsvold, Lloyd McDermott won a scholarship to a large Brisbane school and then studied law at the University in New South Wales. McDermott still works today as a barrister and gives generously of his time and energy to promoting opportunities for young Indigenous males and females. In fact, he is the founder of the Lloyd McDermott Sports Foundation, which helps young Indigenous people achieve their goals and dreams. Lloyd McDermott says he has 3 loves in his life: his family, his fellow Indigenous people, the law, and rugby union. Without a doubt, Lloyd McDermott is an important role model for us all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to do my speech about Matthew Myers. Matthew Myers was born on the 10th of November 1970 in Sydney, New South Wales. He is 48 years old. He is an Indigenous Australian. Mr. Myers attended the Academy of Law in 1997. Mr. Myers held a number of qualifications and accreditations since then from various institutes across Australia. Most of these were in law enforcement, but also the areas of resolution practitioner. He was also the commissioner in 2017. He was appointed as an Australian Law Reform Commissioner. He was the commissioner to lead the inquiry into incarceration rates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Bonner.
Today I want to share the House about Neville Bonner. Neville Bonner was chosen to fill the casual vacancy and he became the first Indigenous Australian to sit in the Australian Parliament. He was elected in his own right in 1972, 1974, 1975 and 1980. In 1979, Bonner was jointly named Australian of the Year along with naturalist Harry Butler. Neville Bonner was a true Indigenous Parliament member for Indigenous and Australian people. Thank you for listening.
I call the member for Saunders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the story of Reginald Walter Saunders. He was born on the 7th of August 1920 at an Aboriginal reserve in Victoria and was brought up by his grandmother. A bright student, he attended school until he was 14 years old. As a teenager, Reg was unafraid to stand up against injustice. When his wages were withheld by an employer, he refused to continue the job until his full entitlement. In 1940, Reg enlisted to fight in the Second World War. He showed leadership potential and was promoted to Lance Corporal and the temporary sergeant in quick succession. He was the first Aboriginal Australian to be commissioned as an officer in the Australian Army. Saunders left the Army in 1954 and worked in the logging and metal industries before joining the Office of Aboriginal Affairs in 1969. In 1971, he was appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire for his community service. A well-respected soldier and leader, Saunders died in 1990, aged 69. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to acknowledge the wonderful achievement by Miss Lily Brown, a young lady who struggled in her youth to succeed at university, but who has since gone to become a successful student studying a Master of Philosophy in Politics Development and Demographic Education at the Canberra University in the UK. Miss Lily Brown originally started studying business but found little passion in the subject. She went on the study of the Bachelor of Art in History and took a particular interest in issues affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Miss Brown also recognised the wonderful things that the Indigenous people of Australia have contributed to, both creatively and culturally. She is passionate about education and would like to influence the education system of including Indigenous people, culture, knowledge, language and ways of knowing. It's important that we acknowledge the empowering of youth and recognising the success of Miss Lily Brown. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I've just been advised that we're calling on the member for Unipin, and this will be a video.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House some of the wonderful achievements of an eminent Indigenous Australian, David Winipon. David Winipon was born at the Point Maclean Mission in South Australia on the 28th of September in 1872 and was the fourth of 9 children. David was very smart and had a strong interest in philosophy, science and music. He loved books, played the organ and learned boot making at the mission. He went on to develop many inventions throughout his life, including an improved handpiece for sheep shearing. He was an esteemed writer who had a book published called Legendary Tales of Australian Aborigines. His extraordinary lifetime of achievements was recognized when he was awarded the Coronation Medal in 1950. David Winipon died on the 7th of February 1967, age 94. After his death, he was further honored in 1995 when he was immortalized on a $50 note. David Winipon was truly inspirational Indigenous Australian. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I now also call the member for Truganini, and this is also a video.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to acknowledge a truly courageous Indigenous Australian, Truganini. Truganini's legacy in an Aboriginal history is without question. She was born around 1822 on Bruny Island, Tasmania, and she was the daughter of a tribal elder. By the time she was 17, she witnessed a number of brutal and violent acts committed against her people. The fighting between white settlers and Aboriginal people became so bad it became known as the Black War. The authorities took action and tasked George Robinson with convincing the remaining Aborigines to move to a nearby island. Truganini acted as a guide and interpreter and even saved Robinson's life on more than one occasion. Tragically, the new settlement on Flinders Island was nothing but a prison and death trap. People were getting sick and dying from diseases. Truganini tried warning her people to stay away. In 1847, she and the remaining 45 survivors were moved to Oyster Cove, where conditions were worse. Sadly, by 1873, she was the only one left alive. She died in 1876, aged 64. The very special Tasmanian will always be remembered for her courage and strength in a truly harsh and brutal time in our colonial history. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kaimeso.
Okay, I call the member for Kassadali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the House to acknowledge an outstanding Indigenous citizen, Mr. Troy Cassadaly, a proud Bundjalung man. He is one of Australia's finest country music singer-songwriters. Troy has received many awards in his 30-year career, but it is his Aboriginal heritage that he is most proud of. He has a deep connection to his people and country, and often returns to Grafton so his children can have this experience too. Troy uses his fame and music to educate people on Indigenous issues and the hardships faced by farmers. He has fundraised for drought relief and bushfire and flood appeals. Troy raises community awareness on Indigenous matters like the freedom rights and the tough life of farmers through his music. Troy shows his generous spirit as a man, artist, father, and Indigenous role model. He reminds us of what is real, of what matters and what doesn't through his music and actions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Gillies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on Adam Giles. Adam Giles was born in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney. Before moving to Alice Springs, he worked in the public service for the Department of Housing and ATSIC. Giles was the first person with Indigenous ancestry to lead a state or territory government. He is a former leader of a country Liberal Party, the Northern Territory, and Chief Minister before being defeated by the Labor Party in 2016. He first appeared in 2004, then later campaigned in the federal seat of Lingari in 2007 before being elected the MP for Bratland in 2008 territory election. Mr. Giles has said that the government should be working to negotiate a turning point in Northern Territory economy. He is set to drive change and has stated that the role of any politician is to make as much change as you can and bring people with you. Giles has recently taken a position as General Manager, External Affairs for Pastoral with Gina Reinhardt's Hancock's Prospecting. Watch this space. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Malone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mayor Vonda Malone is a Torres Strait Islander, born and raised on Thursday Island. In 2016, she became the first female mayor of the Torres Strait Shire Council. With 22 years' experience working with the Australian government, Ms. Malone is very well qualified to be the mayor. She is also experienced in Indigenous affairs such as housing, employment legal services, health and sport. Vonda has also won a Centenary Medal as well as a NAIDOC Award of Excellence. There is no doubt that Vonda Malone's experience and skills will be a huge benefit to communities in the Torres Shire. How proud I am to learn about a strong female Indigenous role model. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, is there any other speakers that have not been called? Okay, before I adjourn the debate for morning tea, I just want to say well done and congratulations, and I think you've done a little bit better than what I did on my first speech in Parliament, debate in Parliament back in 2004. Also want to acknowledge the Speaker of the House, Member for Mulgrave, Curtis Pitt, who is the Speaker of the Queensland Parliament, and we're greatly honoured to be able to have a Speaker that represents us here in North Queensland. Well, the House, this is my favourite moment, will now be adjourned for morning tea.
So we're now going to move on to an opposition motion called Healthy Food Measures, and I call the Youth Shadow Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this Youth Parliament supports that schools must provide free nutritional meals to students at lunchtime. Mr. Speaker, if you look inside students' lunchboxes, you would find very few healthy options. The 2014-15 My Healthy Community data states that 26% of children and adolescents in Australia were overweight or obese. When we consider that we spend 6.5 hours per day at school and we eat 2 meals in that time, we should start by looking at how our daily school lunch can be more nutritious. Schools could support this by providing students with free nutritional meals at first break. Students can take ownership of this change by researching and making lunch suggestions to the tuck shops. Senior students could help prepare the lunches. Researching and preparing lunches will provide a life skill that students will find valuable in the future. Providing a weekly healthy breakfast will give students a great start to the week. Healthier lunches will engage and support healthier minds, which equals qualities of learning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the Youth Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House that once again the Shadow Minister of Health has made a motion that has not been well thought out. School lunches. Our schools have enough to do. Jamie Oliver showed us what happened overseas when schools tried to provide a healthy lunch for their students. The food is boring. The cost of making a lunch is more important than the quality of the lunch. As we all know, many students have allergies. What is going to happen to them? It is a health risk. Who is going to make sure all the students eat the lunch? When kids don't eat, they can't concentrate in class. They will also become unhealthy. One of the skills that bring your lunch to school gives students is being independent. Independent in their choices of food to eat. Independent to make their lunch. Independent in being organised to have their lunch ready to go. This is why the motion to implement school lunches is ridiculous. Junk food is part of the culture we live in. We need to be promoting and supporting what our educators are doing to teach our children how to be smart consumers. Educate, not ban. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the Youth Member for Bandler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am the member for Bandler and I present the following details before you. The introduction of tax on junk food should be allowed because then more people would not buy as much junk food as they would normally buy. If a tax on junk food was introduced, more people of the world today would not have diabetes or other medical conditions that junk food creates. If the tax was to be introduced, the government could raise more revenue to help fund the future health issues that will arise as a result of the consumption of junk food. The introduction of the tax would act as a deterrent to those who continually buy junk food. The advertising of junk food should be banned because it creates health problems such as heart disease and obesity, as that costs Queensland millions of dollars each year. Another reason that the advertising of junk food should be banned is because junk food is not healthy for the mind and it causes mental health issues. If the advertising of junk food was to be banned, many students and adults would not be overweight or obese, and they would have a clear mind. Because people form bad habits and eat too much junk food, they end up finding themselves in a critical position. I believe that all schools in Queensland should provide free nutritional meals to students at lunch time, because then most students of Queensland would not be obese or overweight. All students need healthy food because then they will be able to concentrate and get more schoolwork done. Many students' behaviours would improve if healthy and nutritional meals were to be provided at schools. If all schools in Queensland were to provide free nutritional meals at lunchtime, then more parents would not have to pack as much lunch and they would know that their children would still be getting just as much food as they would normally get. In 2016 in Queensland, 26% of children aged 5 to 17 years were obese or overweight. To get into numbers, 59,000 people were obese and 158,000 people were overweight. If all schools of Queensland were to provide free nutritional meals for lunch, then I say these numbers will only get smaller and smaller. All schools would have to do for lunch is to serve cold meat and salad, yogurt or serves of fruit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Thurston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Did you know that advertising junk food is like advertising diabetes? Hi, I'm Summer Rose from St. Joe Magella, and today I'm going to tell you why we should not be advertising junk food. This is a highly contested issue that is being debated due to the increasing number of our population who are overweight. Advertising is especially designed to lure in children through the use of bright colours and lights and sounds. This ensures that as we get older, we have been brainwashed into being consumers with the predisposition for junk foods. The health connotations are numerous. As well as obesity, junk food affects our health in terms of cholesterol, diabetes, heart diseases, and damages our teeth. Advertising products so profoundly affect us is not morally and ethically practical. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Beatson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House is the tax on junk food. The reason is that people are getting punished for the choices they make on food, what they eat. It is expensive to buy healthy food, that is why most people tend to buy junk food, as it is a lot cheaper and affordable. Maybe they should change the cost of healthy food and think about being fit. Why are people getting punished? I strongly believe that junk food should be banned because people get obesity and not fit. If their sugar ratings are low, then they may eat a bit of junk food to keep it high as normal. Schools should provide free nutritional food, but parents would not like the school to tell what is right for their kids and students. If they have a tuck shop, then they would have to pay for their own lunch. If the school wants them to eat healthy, then they should provide healthy food for free to keep them healthy themselves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for 4 Mile.
Today, I want to share with the House on the motion about the junk food debate. I believe that people have a choice and should be more responsible for foods they eat. A remote area such as Cooktown means that we only get to spend time eating nutritional foods. Why are we punished for living in a remote area and not getting access to junk food? My community and I exercise all the time, which keeps us fit and healthy. Other people should think more about spending their money on sports equipment, parks, and many more things rather than using that time and risk living obese. Finally, children should be taught the health benefits and the information they need of nutritional foods and not so good foods. That way, they can watch their health and choose wisely about the foods they eat in everyday life, including junk foods, so they can grow into strong and healthy children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the topic of junk food. I strongly believe that there should be a tax on junk food. The advertising of junk food should be banned and schools should provide nutritional meals to students at lunchtimes. Junk food plays a huge role in childhood obesity, which leads to a number of health concerns. For example, behavioral issues, teeth and gum problems, along with the later risk of diabetes. I believe there should be more publicity around nutritional foods replacing the advertising of junk food. TV, ads, and billboards all play a huge part in influencing our already influenced children into making poor food choices. Adding a tax on junk food and banning the advertising material associated with junk food will reduce the amount being sold, making it less accessible to our young Australians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on why we should not put taxes on junk food. We should not put taxes on junk food because we exercise and eat healthy along with having a lot of junk food. We should be spending more money on equipment and playgrounds for sporting and exercise. We all should be doing exercising along with eating a lot of junk food and eating healthy. People that live in remote areas like us don't eat much KFC or McDonald's, but why are we still getting punished for other people's action? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Thornton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My topic is the introduction of a tax on junk food. I believe there should be a tax on junk food. Everyone here has heard it sometime in their life not to eat too much junk food because it'll make you sick. I know I have. We were told this at a young age. Australians spend around $4 billion on healthcare associated with obesity. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are 4 times more likely than non-Indigenous Australians to have diabetes. To give you an idea, in some Indigenous communities, around 30% of the people have diabetes compared to around 4% of the general population. The facts are here and it is hurting our health, then a tax should be put in place. Junk food should be a treat, not an everyday item. Bringing in the tax will be a change of lifestyle which will help our young Indigenous people to have a much healthier life in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call the youth member for Burnie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House the issue why schools should not need to supply free nutritious meals within their tuck shops. May I remind you, schools have enough trouble trying to find money for resources, repairs, activities and maintenance. Schools can't be successful if they now also have to give out free food. Schools are not about making money, but giving out free meals could break their budget. Our school's main goal is to educate. If the government makes this law, many schools may go bankrupt or possibly need to lose staff. Another point I'd like to make is it's not up to government to take the food that goes into tuck shops. Students should be eating healthy food, but it should be cheaper, not free. Research shows that 62% of children eat fruit at school. This proves that most students are making healthy choices. In the end, it's up to parents to decide what their children eat. Most children eat packed lunches anyway. 72% of school children are in the average age weight range. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Nomac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on an introduction of junk food tax. I strongly believe there should be a tax on junk food because then it will be harder for kids and adults to purchase and will hopefully improve the health of people. By taxing unhealthy foods such as food with saturated fats, excess salt and sugar, and making healthy foods such as fruit and vegetables cheaper, we would hope more people would choose the healthy option. I also believe there should be less advertising of junk food and that there should be no junk food at school tuck shops. I believe schools should work towards providing a healthy meal for students to help meet their nutritional needs. It will also help educate them about the healthy lifestyle while they are still young so that they can take those healthy habits into adulthood. Lastly and most importantly, junk food has a really bad effect on health. It can cause a lot of health problems. Diabetes is one of the main risks, especially with our Indigenous people. It can also cause obesity, heart attack, teeth and gum issues, and some cancer. It can also affect students' learning and behavioural outcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like all businesses, fast food is a business that requires advertising in order to make a profit. Without advertising, it cannot be successful. I believe it is a responsibility of parents to make choices on what their children do and don't eat. While banning advertising for junk food and banning kids from accessing junk food may seem like a solution, the reality is that it is way more complicated. Research shows that efforts to ban children from having junk food could have unintended consequences. When kids are deprived or restricted, they may have the tendency to hide their food in guilt or to overeat. When kids get a taste of something forbidden, research shows that they end up overindulging. Surely, it would be better to take a more proactive approach. Better still, let's educate children to grow and cook their own food. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call the youth member for Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the issue of the provision of free nutritional meals by schools for their students. Schools should provide a menu of free nutritional meals to their students as this will benefit their ability to function better at school. Worldwide studies have shown academic test scores have improved with the provision of free nutritional meals at lunchtimes. Our students' academic progress will improve with the provision of free nutritional meals given to students at lunchtimes. Students who don't attend school without nutritious meals for breakfast or lunch are at risk of developing chronic diseases such as diabetes, some cancers, and cardiovascular disease, which is heart problems. Students who don't bring their lunch may feel a sense of shame. That may be eased by schools providing these free nutritional meals. By not eating nutritional meals, student behaviour is affected physically and emotionally. This also affects their learning and their relationship inside and outside of school. Schools must provide these free nutritional meals at lunchtime to benefit their students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call a youth member for Lingari.
Thank you, Mrs. Speaker. I urge you to carefully consider the proposal for students to provide nutritious meals at lunchtime. At a time when schools' tuck shops are already struggling to stay open, I cannot believe that this preposterous idea could be tabled here today. Has the opposition truly considered how they will fund this proposal? Have they considered the cost of healthy ingredients, the cost of wages, and let's not forget, the cost of equipment needed to prepare meals for 850 students. That's meals for our school alone. Do we seriously need to burden parents with more fundraising for this idea? Like Vincent Lingari's strike, which lasted 8 years, I don't plan to postpone action on this proposal. His story is featured in the popular Paul Kelly song, From Little Things, Big Things Grow. Would you prefer low-cost food or no food at all? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call the youth member for Ridgeway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House the issue of banning junk food advertising. Advertising of junk food should be banned because it tempts people to buy junk food. 28% of Australian kids are overweight or obese. This means that a lot of kids are not getting the right amount of fruit and vegetables they need to maintain a healthy, functioning body. Kids should at least have 2 helpings of fruit each day and 5 serves of vegetables. Junk food provides few nutrients due to that they are high in sugar, fat, and salt. When more junk food is bought, less healthy food is purchased. Children seeing these junk food advertisements crave junk food, which is not good for their learning, the way they feel, and their behaviour. This could lead to many health issues, including cancer, type 2 diabetes, energy imbalance, tooth decay, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. These are just a few of the downsides to junk food advertisements. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The debate today is around good health measures, in particular, whether advertising junk food should be banned. I must state I oppose this idea for many reasons. Advertising is the way that you can educate the community by using the facts. The important fact in this debate is that we should be talking about balance, and nobody can argue that our daily diet should be balanced. Balance means that every major food group should be included in our diet, and yes, that means fats and sugars as well. Advertising is the way you share messages. We should be talking about promoting advertising, not banning it. If only we could tap into the expertise of Jimmy Little, the well-known Indigenous singer who promoted Indigenous health and diet through his music and teaching. I urge you open your mind to the message and embrace advertising fully. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Monks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The introduction of a tax on junk food. Research shows too much junk food and lack of exercise equals obesity. I think schools should spend money on healthier options that make us feel better about ourselves, inside and out. The best way to inspire healthier choices, I feel, is to introduce a tax on all junk food sold in our tuck shops. At first, students will choose the healthier option because it's cheaper. Hopefully, in time, they will realise they are buying the yummy option, not just the cheaper and healthier. Eating healthier will reduce the amount of time you need to exercise. This means more time for fun. There's no doubt students will still buy the junk food, but perhaps only as a treat once per week. The introduction of a tax on junk food is not proposed as a punishment for liking it, but as a way to persuade a healthier lifestyle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Mailman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A tax on junk food? Where is this going to stop? I ask you, have you considered the average family in Australia who faces the daily challenge of feeding, clothing, housing and educating their children? Have you ever thought about the single-parent families who face this struggle on one income? I suggest that this proposal cannot be accepted at all. Let's take the focus off taxing junk food. Instead, we can look at ways of improving food options and making sure that they are not too expensive for the average family. My best example could be to consider Deborah Mailman, the actress who grew up in Mount Isa in remote Queensland. She is one of 5 children. Imagine her family facing an extra tax like this when it is already expensive to live in places like Mount Isa. A tax on junk food? No way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the topic of good health measures. I think the government should introduce taxes on junk food. This will make the consumers think about purchasing the item. This could assist with helping the nation's epidemic of obesity. Advertisement. When junk food is advertised, it makes people want to buy the item, without them knowing how much sugar and calories are actually in it. Without this knowledge, it can cause an influx of health issues, like diabetes. Plus, the item would have been processed through factories, getting more fats added to it, then being cooked in oil, being very unhealthy for the community. Schools must provide free nutritional meals to students at lunchtime because it's a healthy diet for a nice lifestyle choice for kids. Thank you for listening, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Maitland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I implore you to carefully consider the proposal to provide healthy lunches for school children. Yes, we know parents are busy. Yes, we know it is a challenge to provide healthy food for growing children. But shouldn't this responsibility remain with the parents? On this topic, I believe the government should not be held solely responsible. In fact, I could expand this argument and suggest that schools providing food is an insult to parents. Parents are the first carers and educators of children, and we have no right to deprive them of this role. Like Madge Maitland, who went to war and fought proudly for Australia, I plan to campaign for the rights of parents to provide the most basic essential for their children. That is, food to sustain them throughout the school day. Good health choices must remain with parents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The debate we have in front of us today is about banning junk food advertising. Let's think about who the advertising is targeting. Obviously, the children don't have the money to buy the food, so the target must be the parents. How insulting to parents' intelligence. Parents know exactly how to care for their children and provide the right food. They can easily work out what the advertisers are saying, and they can decide what is right for their family. I say leave advertising right where it is. We learn about new products and services through advertising. It is through advertising that we got to know the Indigenous rapper Baker Boy, aka Denzel Baker. My final word is no ban on advertising. We are smart and can make up our own mind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call the youth member for McAvoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must advocate strongly that no ban be imposed on the sale of junk food. When I hear the word ban, I immediately think of one group being disadvantaged. Like Tony McAvoy, I want to encourage equal opportunity and basic human rights. Do you know how expensive it is to feed a family with the current cost of fruit and vegetables? Take a look at a family's weekly grocery bill and you'll see straight away that it costs way more to remain healthy. It is clear to me that fast food may be the only option for some families. If a tax is added, imagine the cost rising again. Lastly, let's stop using the term fast junk food. I prefer to say convenience food, which by the way must comply with health standards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call the youth member for Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on that advertising of junk food should not be banned. The main reason is that we all deserve to have a choice in what we see in the media. The fast food chains, such as McDonald's, have purchased the right to advertise on TV and social media. They are multi-million-dollar companies that make profit from ads encouraging people to buy their products. These companies are responsible for employing thousands of everyday people that need to work to support themselves and families. Through sponsorship and advertising support many organizations, sporting events through their campaigns. Coca-Cola Coke is a sponsor of major events such as the Olympics. Even though these ads are on TV and social media, it is the parents' responsibility to monitor and control the amount of exposure to their child or children. It is the parents' responsibility to control the amount of junk food they allow their children to consume. Children should not be hidden away from TV, social media ads, as it is socially accepted everywhere now and in the future. In keeping with freedom of choice, junk food should not be banned. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call a youth member for Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on that schools should not provide free nutritious meals to students at lunchtime. The main reason is that we all deserve to have a choice. The cost to the school's government and taxpayers would be astronomical, particularly if students are not liking or eating the food and it is being disposed. It is a natural instinct and responsibility for parents to provide for and feed their child or children. Some children may have allergies or health dietary requirements. Eating school food may not fit the individual eating plans, which may affect the health of the child. For example, a child with gluten intolerances will need to have a special diet. For religious reasons, some children are not allowed to eat certain foods as it goes against their culture. They may be offended if it is served or on display. In keeping with the freedom of choice, free nutritious meals should not be provided in schools. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Call a youth member for Gulpilil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House my belief that healthy food for students mustn't be given away for free to schools. Firstly, I believe that healthy food for students shouldn't be given away because it takes money away from funding school excursions. School excursions help students with their learning, especially if you have assessments coming up based on excursions. Secondly, spending money on free student healthy food means there may not be enough money to buy new resources. For example, the school may need new sports equipment, new computers, or new learning materials, and it won't be able to afford them if the money is spent on free healthy food for students. Therefore, I strongly believe that healthy food for students shouldn't be given away for free to schools. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I call a youth member for Harradine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to explain to you why banning junk food advertising will not make any difference to people wanting to eat and choosing to eat junk food. For example, when the government banned cigarettes advertising, has it stopped people from smoking? So will it make any real difference if we ban junk food advertising? No. A better idea would be to teach people about healthy food and how to make healthy food choices and where to find and how to cook healthy food. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the speaking list that I haven't called? Okay. This bit you've got to start paying attention for, okay? The question is that the motion moved by the Youth Shadow Minister for Health be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I think the noes have it. A division has been called. Ring the bells. Okay, you both are standing up. Okay. So noes, Emery. Close the bars. The question is that the motion be agreed to, for which a division has been called. Ayes shall move to the right of the chair, noes to the left. I call on the tellers to count the votes. Honourable youth members, the result of the division is ayes 23, noes 49. The division is resolved in the negative. You can now take your seats again. And honourable youth members, I'm going to hand over now to your next speaker of the day. Before I do, I just want to thank you for your time that you've put into understanding and being involved in the Parliament process, and I want to thank the schools and also the parliamentary staff as well. This is a very important part of how a government functions, not only at a Queensland state level but also at a federal level, and everything you do in life will be determined at some point in a room just like this. So whether it's how much you get paid, what the rules are when you drive cars, how long you have to go to school for, whether you have healthy food at school or not, those sorts of decisions are often put into legislation and debated in a house just like this in Brisbane, in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Canberra. So I encourage you to understand the process. But now I'm going to hand over to Michael Healy. Michael is the state member for Cairns, and of which we're sitting in his electorate at the moment. So thank you very much for today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I call the youth leader of the House.
I move that the House do now adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House things that I'm passionate about. First, my family and friends mean everything to me. My family is close, and my parents have supported and encouraged me in everything that I want to do. Culture and religion are an important part of my life. They give me a sense of identity and belonging. My health and well-being is important to me. I exercise and participate in team sports such as soccer. It is the friendship bonds that I have developed and the ability to participate in team sports that has encouraged me to build on my leadership skills. I am currently an Indigenous leader and a house captain at my school. Both roles I take very seriously as they allow me to be a responsible peer and a mentor to other students. Being friendly is important to me as I enjoy interacting with my peers and to gain different perspectives through talking and sharing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to call on the youth member for Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to draw the House's attention to the problem of the loss of traditional Indigenous knowledge and to propose Indigenous youth cultural camps as a solution. Many urban Indigenous children don't have the opportunity to experience their traditional culture or country. Traditional ways are being lost because there aren't enough knowledge holders. I propose the government establish Indigenous cultural camps for Indigenous children and run by elders. Traditional hunting, dances, languages, art, plant knowledge and stories would be taught by elders. Elders would be positive Indigenous role models. This would help Indigenous children understand their culture and have respect for themselves. This would mean more Indigenous people would have a stronger connection to their culture and country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The youth member for Hess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House of the food shortage issues on Stephen Island and Torres Strait. The residents are struggling at the moment due to a food shortage caused by having just one monthly food delivery that arrives by barge, if they're lucky. There are times during the year that it may not come for 2 months. This significantly impacts on their health and well-being. They have no fresh fruit or veggies and edible meat. Food costs are considerably higher than on the mainland. It is impossible to eat healthily. I propose the government fund farming program to help Torres Strait Islanders grow and produce their own fresh foods and to have sustainable food sources. This could include aquaculture. This would involve education programs on planting and cultivation and rebates for purchasing gardening materials and equipment. Farming their own food would give Torres Strait Island communities reliable food sources and improve their health and well-being. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be discussing the negative effects of the new Edmonton KFC opening. Firstly, one horrible aspect about KFC is that childhood obesity is already a massive issue, and we don't want to tempt every single child with this fast food chain, causing them to lose unnecessary weight. Secondly, another major issue is that KFC is near McDonald's and is right next to the Rapids, which are other fast food chains. This means it is likely families would be even more tempted with the convenience of the variety of fast food options, not giving kids healthy choices for dinner. Third and finally, KFC has low prices, but over time, I'm certain that the more people buy this unhealthy choice, the more the prices will rise and become unaffordable for families. Although KFC tastes great, and we all love our Kentucky Fried Chicken, fast food needs to only be a sometimes food. And with the store opening up in our neighbourhood, it tempts people to make unhealthy decisions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Jarrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House about the need to have shade covers over the local swimming pool. Many students access the swimming pool in Melinda. This pool is open to the public all year round, but it is our youth that need to be protected the most from sun. It is essential that a shade cover be placed over the area to ensure that the children meet the sun's smart policy. Being proactive and prevent sunburn is a key priority for the region. The local school and community are essential, working towards gaining funds to achieve this goal, but more is needed. I'd like to acknowledge the use of sunshades over our local parks area and encourage more to be built. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on why our schools should provide free buses for students with low attendance rates. I strongly believe that schools should provide free buses because it would benefit families and students. Families would be better off if schools provide free buses. They would not have to spend as much money on expensive fuel for their cars. Therefore, they would have more money to go towards other financial responsibilities such as food, electricity, and rent. Students with low attendance would definitely benefit if schools provide free buses. Students would arrive at school every day on time and therefore would not miss important events or tests. Students would not miss any lessons, which means they would be more successful academically. Students would be safer if there was a free bus provided, as they would not have to walk long distance in extreme weather conditions with carrying a heavy bag. You must agree that schools should provide free buses for students with low attendance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House the initiative of the local school in Malanda to transform the current sport and the cover area into an enclosed hall capable of hosting key community events. Have you considered playing sports in the middle of a hot summer day or a cold windy winter morning in far north Queensland? Students at Malanda State School will hopefully be given a chance to enjoy an all-weather purpose-built hall in the near future. Currently, students have to walk across the oval to gain access to the hall. During the wet season, students often get very wet and the whole area becomes extremely slippery and dangerous. The school and the local community are working together to raise funds to support this project. There is great excitement for the school youth, and I look forward to revisiting the school to see the development in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call upon the youth member for Rees.
I rise to speak on the youth crime rate in my town of Gordonvale. In Gordonvale, the youth crime rate is rising higher each year. There are children at the age of 8 breaking the law, stealing, drawing graffiti at the local skate park, trespassing and vandalising public property, including houses, schools and shops. The locals want it to stop. I would like to do something about it. For the youth crime rate to stop, children need to be occupied. To do that, children need entertainment choices in Gordonvale. Gordonvale already has a number of sporting venues and teams to keep children occupied and make friends. A new skate park or a PCYC in town so children can play with their friends is needed immediately. Petting zoos for children to play with animals, free sausage, sizzles and movies in the park, a new gaming centre for kids to play games are all good entertainment choices in Gordonvale where they can meet and make new friends. My solution is to have more free activities for kids in the town of Gordonvale immediately. Thank you.
I call on the youth member for Firebrace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to advise the House of a concept to better our community. It is very important to get people off screens and help families spend more time outdoors. Currently, there is a large percentage of families who stay home accessing their devices. While there are parks and recreation centers still available, unfortunately, most families don't want to go out most of the time because it's too far away or they don't have access to a vehicle. The government must provide joint activity centers in each suburb. These activity centers would include swimming pools and game fields. This would then allow people to play games like football, soccer, hockey, walking, and cycling. So our families would then access outdoor parks and centers easily if they don't have transport. There are more things in life than devices, and it's up to our government to provide them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. High cost of living in remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Hello, my name is Rian Setnich and I am from St. Joe Magella Primary School. Today I would like to share my concerns about the very high cost of living in remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. It is very expensive to live in the Cape and communities in the Torres Strait. Everything from the price of buying or renting a home to buying bread and milk is 2 or 3 times more expensive than it is in the towns and cities like Cairns. Fruit, vegetables, and fresh meat take a long time to get up to communities, and it costs a lot more than it does down south because of the shipping costs and company profit. It is not fair that these communities have to pay so much more than everyone else for the basic things we all need to live a long and healthy life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Lingwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Valerina Hudson and I'm 12 years old. My family is from Murray Island in the Torres Straits and the Kunju tribe in Cape York. Today I'll be advocating for a greater spending by the state government to assess students in remote community schools to get a better education. Many people in the Capes have to leave their communities to get a better education from secondary schools and onwards. They sometimes return to their communities to share their skills and knowledge. Sometimes they don't return to their communities, which makes the communities weak and breaks up families. First, we, as a state government, need to build more secondary schools in the Cape. Currently, only 24% of people living in remote communities have a secondary school. These new secondary schools should be built closer to communities so families can stay together and not send their kids away to boarding schools. These secondary schools can also help bring communities together by offering education for adults who may not have finished school, by bringing education closer to homes. It will save the government's money as transport and boarding costs will be gone. Second, education leads to jobs. Without a good education, it is difficult for people to get a good education. And an Aboriginal student who's finished year 10 or year 11 has 40% higher chance of gaining employment. A student who's finished year 12 has a 53% greater chance of finding work. By spending more money for education in the Cape, people will be able to get better jobs. Who better to teach Aboriginal kids than Aboriginal teachers? Who better to keep Cape communities safe than Aboriginal police officers? We must have better education in the Cape so that they can have a good knowledge. We must build more secondary schools so that they can have a great job. We must have secondary schools so they have a better future for their family and their communities and can help them how to save money and learn more stuff that they don't know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right, I've just been informed the next speaker for Wentong, is going to appear on the video screen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House the issue of marine debris. Plastic is a major threat in our community. Plastic rubbish, including plastic bags, bottles, and straws, are finding their way into the ocean and is harming our precious marine life. Taga State College and Our Lady of the Sacred Heart were given a chance to participate in an after-school project. By using a combination of art and science, we were taught about the harmful effects of marine debris in the ocean. Creating lino prints, we worked the features of the sea affected by plastic. Screen printing was another way to focus on some marine animals which potentially could be harmed. We screen printed reusable shopping bags which were displayed in Gabatatui, a local art centre. In the future, we want to be able to walk on the white soft sand, shells shining brightly and swim in the crystal clear water free from all plastic. We want our ocean to be looked after so that all marine life can survive. If we do not dispose of our waste responsibly, then our waters will be filled with rubbish and bacteria. Many of our precious sea life will die, and Earth will not be a pleasant place to be. We hope that one day the ocean will return to its former beauty. The ocean needs our help now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. I call on the youth member for Bancroft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw to the attention of the House the issue of feral animals in our local area. I have personally witnessed feral pigs running through the cane fields next to my school, and I am also aware that there are large numbers of feral cats in areas like the Wharf. Over 18 million feral cats in Australia. These animals can cause severe habitat destructions and have been responsible for the deaths of a lot of native species, such as 35 species of birds, 36 mammals, 7 reptiles, and 3 amphibians. Pigs were brought from Europe to Australia by the First Fleet in 1788 as livestock, but they soon escaped an established wild population that have expanded over time. Today it is estimated that Australia has up to 24 million feral pigs. During the school holidays, a stray bullet from someone hunting in the fields near my school came through the window of our classroom and went through our smartboard. Thankfully no one was injured. Surely more can be done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Western, and just to let you know, this is also going to be via video.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to acknowledge a wonderful event that took place recently on Thursday Island. The Williams Zenith Cultural Festival is a 4-day biannual event held during September. The festival showcases our unique heritage and identity, where we celebrate the practice, revitalization, and preservation of our treasured Islander languages, culture, art, and ceremony. The festival was a huge success, and visitors came from near and far to witness a spectacular cultural extravaganza. 80 communities came together to see and perform the traditional dances. There was also traditional feasting, boat races, and stalls selling cultural artifacts and yummy food. The festival also provided an opportunity for our families to reconnect, come together, and share our culture, heritage, beliefs, and traditional customs with the rest of Australia. On behalf of my school and the entire social community, I would like to thank everyone who helped to plan and put together this outstanding event. I would also like to thank the Palaszczuk government for their continued support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call upon the youth member for Bishop.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. My name is Jenna Rubin. I am 11 years old and I live in Cooktown. I'm worried about our oceans, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. It does not matter where you are in the world, it is one big ocean. I have been a Yukopaja Moluku junior ranger in Cooktown for nearly 5 years now. To be a junior ranger is to care for your country, your land and your sea. Every year we clean up rubbish on our beaches with Tangaroa Blue. Last year we pulled and sorted over 8 tons of rubbish and plastic from Archer's Point alone. Imagine 8 tons of plastic from just one beach in Cape York. What about the thousands of other beaches in Cape York, let alone Australia? I was so lucky to attend the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Hawaii as a junior ranger with my mum and sisters 2 years ago. There we saw many other people from around the world trying to make the world realize how bad the problem is. We have to do something now. As a member of the community of Cooktown, located in far north Queensland, on the edge of the Great Barrier Reef, I wish to present to you a bill of suggestion for the protection of the reef from further environmental damage. Firstly, we could start by putting more bins out on the street so people will hopefully put their rubbish in the bins. Educating councils and communities to simply store their bins at the front of the fence line instead of out the back would provide easy alternatives to just chucking your unwanted rubbish on the ground. How disgusting. Better than throwing it away, why not take it home and recycle? The cash for container return machines are being opened up all over Queensland on the 2nd of November. I can walk home from school daily and collect 8 to 12 containers daily. at 10 cents per container and collecting 12 containers each school day. There are 37 days of school left. I could make $44.40 to spend on Christmas presents. Finally, I suggest that all councils also put bars on the gutters to prevent rubbish from getting into them. Previously, most gutters in F&Q towns are not preventing enough rubbish from entering our pristine waters. We sit on the edge of the Great Barrier Reef, and every windy day, which we have many, or wet season downpour results in tons of rubbish going down our drains and out to the sea. By simply installing bars that go across the front of drains, a lot of potential damage to our reef and waterways could be prevented. Thank you.
Just before I call the youth member for what, just want to let you know this will also be a video presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House a local issue that impacts Saba Island and the Torres Strait: water supply. For most of 2016, 2017 and 2018, we have had to drink water that was boiled or bottled because of a bacteria called E. coli. Each day we were provided with bottled water at school, and as it wasn't safe to drink out of the tap. At our houses, we had to boil the water before drinking it. A similar issue is currently happening at Thursday and Horn Islands. Single-use water bottles are expensive and bad for our environment, especially since our islands has no recycling. During the dry season, we have drought for several months. During this time, we have water restrictions in place. This often means that water supply to our houses is only turned on for a couple of hours each day. It is hard to believe that we can't always drink fresh water from the tap when we live in Australia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call upon the youth member for Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Kenny. Today I would like to tell you about Eddie Mabo. I decided to speak about Eddie Mabo as I was inspired him in a history class this year. Eddie Mabo was born in Murray Island in 1938. By the time he was 20, he had moved to the mainland Australia. He worked in several jobs, but one notable job was that he was a gardener in James Cook University, Townsville. He was married to Benita and had 7 children and adopted 3 more. While working at JCU, Eddie found that Aboriginal people did not have land rights, so he had started to fight Aboriginal rights. It was difficult 10 years of fighting, but he was able to argue in the High Court and won. Eddie died in 1992. After his death, he was named Man of the Year by Sydney Morning Herald. A library at JCU Townsville was named after him and has been studied by countless Australian school children. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope you have a chance to learn about him and to be inspired by Eddie Mabo.
I call on the youth member for Yangi Pingu, and he will also be appearing on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform the House about a local issue that impacts on the residents of Saibai Island and other islands of the Torres Strait. Access to fresh produce. Sea Swift provides a regular barge service between Cairns and Thursday Island. The barge only comes to Saibai once a week, though this is not always on the same day. When the produce arrives, it has traveled for over a week from Cairns to Horn Island, then reloaded onto a smaller barge to come to the outer islands. The
quality of the produce is not as good as you would get in Cairns or other regional areas due to the time it takes to travel. A few days after the barge has arrived, most of the produce has been purchased from our local store. Due to water restrictions, it is difficult for families to grow a lot of produce during the dry season. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just before I call the youth member for Gilbert, I just referred to the member for Yirrupingi there as he. Obviously, it's a she. You don't get that marked on the paper here. I'd like to call the youth member for Gilbert.
I rise to speak on behalf of the youth member of Gilbert and as the traditional owner of Laura, Green Country in Cape York. A reason why I'm talking about my country Laura is because it has a lot of cultural sites that includes ancient cave paintings of my ancestors, ochre sites, and roots where my family swim and fish. This is my connection to Laura. Greenkins are spirits, both good, timora, and mischievous in gin. Green Country has been assessed and passed all the stages for National Heritage, so now we're currently waiting for Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk to approve the listing and make an announcement that Laura is on the National Heritage list. A reason why we've put it up for the National Heritage list is because the pressure of mining on my country can destroy many cultural treasures and sites. I hope Green Country will get on the National Heritage list because it will be the first cultural site listed on National Heritage in Cape York. I also believe it could be World Heritage too. Thank you for listening to my speech, Yalida.
I call upon the youth member for Milroy. And if the youth member for Milroy isn't here, I will then call on the youth member for O'Shea. Oh, Milroy, sorry, there you are.
Good afternoon, Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Benji Duffin. Fellow members of the Parliament, I would like to address the House about the serious issue that is affecting our Queensland youth. My name is Benji. I'm a proud young member of the Jabagai Rainforest Tribe in the Cairns region. I believe that all Queensland schools should have an Indigenous culture room. Our Australian children are missing out on experiencing the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. It's great that we celebrate our Indigenous cultures and histories in Native Week, Reconciliation Week, and Closing the Gap, but we need to do more. Having a hands-on culture room filled with artifacts, posters, music, traditional weapons, mock food, and inviting guest speakers would impart knowledge and give all our greater scenes of being Australian. We have the oldest living culture in the world. We need a culture room in every school. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I now call upon the youth member for Chulborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to inform the House of the issue of homelessness in Cairns. Having the highest rate of homelessness per capita in the nation, Cairns is a destination for many Indigenous people coming from various remote communities. This may be because they urgently require medical care, housing support services, or education and training services. But for most, the only form of income they receive are government benefits. Affording next to nothing in terms of accommodation, this leads to homelessness. The most common form of homelessness is secondary homelessness. This means people who are staying in short-term accommodations, overcrowded houses, or similar. Clearly, the problem of homelessness in Cairns cannot be ignored. One of the many solutions to it is to give the homeless people of Cairns a voice and let them speak for themselves. We can do this by hosting community events that give homeless people the chance to speak in front of leaders and decision makers. This will lead to establishing a broader horizon on how to fix this issue and help the homeless. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call upon the youth member for O'Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow members of Parliament, I would like to address the House about the repeated flooding of the Torres Strait Islands. My name is Shania Randolph. I am a proud Torres Strait Islander woman. Our Torres Strait Islander community has been constantly damaged. Towns and islands have washed away. Tropical storms and water waves have left their mark on the islander people. They have had no help, no aid, no people to come and help clean up. I do care and must help them. We need to help our islander brothers and sisters to rebuild their homes, their life and beaches. Often my family and friends bring me to say it's all gone. The flood waters and strong winds have washed everything away. We must help. We need to build emergency centres on the lands. We must use our SES doctors and soldiers to help rebuild. We must care. We must help. We must aid our islander families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to advise the House of recent events in Cairns. Cairns needs to get rid of parking issues as it is adding stress and pressure to residents' daily lives. I think this is because of the expensive cost of overstaying your park, a serious problem particularly around the hospitals where the most vulnerable, the elderly and sick are affected. According to the Cairns Regional Council, making extra paid parking will ensure a greater turnover of vehicles. But I represent locals, workers and shopkeepers who are all worried that paid parking is scaring off shoppers and tourists. The Cairns Council has also changed paid parking times to Monday to Sunday, 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. I also want to ask, why has the new Civic Theatre, Aquarium and Monroe Modern Parklands been allowed to be inside of each other without a decent car park? Something needs to be done about the issue of parking in the Cairns City area. Member for Gillespie won't give up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for O'Donnell.
Thank you, Speaker, and fellow members of Parliament. My name is Alay Garil. I attend Roland State College. I would like to take this opportunity to address the House about a serious issue that is affecting our Queensland community. It's our farmers. The drought has destroyed our farmers' livelihood, families, cattle and crops. We need to help the farmers and their families now. The farmers grow food for our country. The government needs to give more dams, look after our waterways and educate farmers on how to be drought-proof. People should donate money, food, clothing and lots of water. The bank should understand the farmers' money problem and give them credit and support the farmers. We'll walk off the land if we don't help. The farmers are our mates. Without their food, we'll have to eat food provided from overseas farmers. The farmers are the backbone of Australia. We must donate water, food, help any way we can. We must help our farmers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Arno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House things that are important to me. I enjoy playing sports like soccer. It teaches me new skills like teamwork, sportsmanship and responsibility. Soccer is an energetic sport and I get a lot of satisfaction in playing competitively. My family have always supported and encouraged me to play soccer and to play the best I can. They are proud of me. School is important to me too.
I enjoy school and I want to get the best education possible. This will be by attending school every day and following school rules, such as the Warri Way. Having a good education is important to be successful in life. At school, I enjoy learning and my favourite subjects are English, Science and HPE. I get to share and socialise daily with my friends. School is great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Moffat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow members of Parliament, I would like to address the House about a serious issue with our teaching school students about our multicultural society. My name is Colin Payet. I am a proud Australian politician. We live in a multicultural society. We need to educate the young about other cultures to build acceptance. With understanding comes tolerance and recognition. A wonderful multicultural room should have these items: artifacts, paintings, models, books, authentic clothing, auto clips, classic movies, and music. These school multicultural rooms are an important key to sharing and experiencing all cultures we need to build a fair society. When we understand other people's way of life, we create connection to community and trust. The only way we can do this is by sharing our family stories in a school multicultural room. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the youth member for Clanton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to share with the House how many Aboriginal and Torres Strait people see the traditional Indigenous game are a way that their culture can survive for many to stay active and healthy. Traditional games not only help Indigenous youth to get physically fit, but they also involve elders and communities by teaching the smaller children how to play games, collaborate and maintain cultural ways. In Cairns, we need to have Indigenous games brought back into our communities and schools. This is essential for keeping our culture and tradition alive, strong, continuous through this and future generations. This can be achieved through Queensland Indigenous Sport Development Offices and other Indigenous programs. I strongly believe that we need Indigenous games not only in Cairns but throughout all of Queensland, so that both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people can have a go, experience success, strength, family and community unity and keep our culture alive, strong and proud. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call upon the youth member for Ella.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to share with the House the importance of protecting Australian wildlife. Australian wildlife needs to be protected so our unique animals do not become extinct and are there to be enjoyed by all people at any time. One way we can protect the animals is by building wildlife corridors. These corridors can be an overpass or an underpass tunnel, or even a canopy bridge. Animals may sometimes need to cross busy roads and highways to get to new environments, find food and shelter. It is our job to protect them. Cassowaries, wallabies, possums, koalas and dingoes could all use our wildlife corridor to cross from one side of the road to the other. It is up to us, the Australian people, to protect our unique Australian wildlife. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call upon the member for Jowai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow Queenslanders, I am sure that it is not necessary to convince you of the negative consequences of the over-reliance on the use of plastics. Here in Cairns, we have the iconic Great Barrier Reef right on our doorstep. Each day we witness boatloads of tourists making their way out to the reef to see this natural wonder for themselves. Do we want that memory to be one of litter, pollution, animals harmed, spilt oil? I could go on. As member for Jarwai, I implore you to stop and think about how much plastic you use. Yes, on one hand, we must congratulate Woolworths and Coles for banning single-use plastic bags. But why manufacture small plastic collectibles? But wait, there's more, and hopefully it will be positive. Last week, Coles announced that they are using money saved from the plastic bags to encourage students to apply for grants to save the environment. Now that is a step in the right direction. Come on, fellow Queenslanders, let's join the movement to limit plastics. We have the state government behind us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the youth member for Gorey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Did you know 95 children have been charged with more than 450 crimes ranging from assault to breaking into homes and stealing cars in Queensland? Well, one day I was walking home after dancing and I heard the horn of a car repetitively beeping, and in my opinion that normally means someone has broken into the vehicle. A child who only looked 8 or 9 was directly running away from the car. At such a young age like this, to break into a car makes me worry about the consequences of youth crime. Mignon McLaughlin once said the head never rules the heart, but just becomes its partner in crime. I believe that Mignon McLaughlin is trying to say your brain cannot control your heart, but it is up to you if you decide to commit a crime. I hope you agree that youth crime in Queensland is important enough for the government to place on its agenda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call on the member for Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'd like to share with the House we are students from a school by the sea, Yarra State School. We would like to ask for funding to upgrade our school. We as girls love playing sport. We would love to have our very own netball court. We love going to other schools to play sports, but love other schools to visit our school as well. We call it home game. They will love it where our school is by the sea, and as well as a vegetable garden and flower garden. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there anybody on the speaking list that I have not called?
Thank you, honourable youth members. The question is that the House do now adjourn. We do have one more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the need for government to invest in increasing the number of Indigenous women studying medical science. I propose this be done by offering study scholarships, work experience programs and research grants to Indigenous girls in high schools and universities. Aboriginal people have been curing themselves long before Western medicines was introduced. Traditionally, Indigenous women are the healers in our culture. They carry the knowledge of plants to create their own medicines to heal many different illnesses. Indigenous women not only know what plants to use them, but when to use them and how. Their healing is based on healing the whole person, not just the illness. I believe that female Indigenous medical scientists would be able to combine Western ways in their traditional knowledge to develop a cure of some of the many incurable diseases in today's society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, I think now we might be able to put the motion. The question is that the House do now adjourn. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable members, before we do fully adjourn the Parliament, I want to take this opportunity to commend all of you for a very high quality group of speeches. You've spoken very confidently, conscientiously and effectively, and I certainly, after seeing today, know that we're in very good hands with this young group of people that we know will come through into our senior school ranks and into our community as future leaders. I want to thank the Youth Sergeant-at-Arms and our youth parliamentary attendants for their work also. Just like in the Parliament, for real, we have people who perform these roles, and they are critical roles, again, to ensure that the Parliament functions properly and correctly. And so I certainly do say thank you to all of those people who've played those roles as well. I do want to digress for just a moment and say how personally proud I am to see the inaugural Junior Youth Indigenous Parliament here in Cairns. I'm very, very passionate about Indigenous issues, and that goes beyond my working life. My wife is a Kuki-Yalanji woman. I'm the proud father of 3 Aboriginal children, and it is amazing to see the high calibre that we've had here today of students and the contributions you've made. All of your electorates, as you know, have been named after eminent Indigenous Australians, people at the top of their fields, people who've made a great contribution. And today you stood on their shoulders, and so it's always important to remember where we've been in the past to know where we're going to go in the future. I do want to acknowledge that, of course, today you've had but a taste of what it is like to be in a real parliamentary setting, and I hope you really enjoyed the experience and learned something from it. But I do want to impress upon you that whilst I'm sure somewhere in the crop of students today we will see one of you or some of you be elected members of Parliament or elected people in some capacity, I do want to say that you don't need to be an elected person to be a leader. It's very important that you look around your communities, your school environments, the streets where you live. There are people who play very important roles as leaders in our communities, and they include people who are here today, like your teachers. They include people who help you at your sporting club, your coaches, and of course, very importantly, your parents. So just remember that being a leader isn't about getting a name, getting a title. It's about what you do with your time and what you do with your voice. And that's very, very important. I hope you take it away with you today. These events certainly do not happen by accident. I do want to say that there's been an enormous contribution here made today by a number of people, and I do want to take some time to say thank you to them. I want to acknowledge firstly that we're here at the Cairns Convention Centre, and say thank you to Ross Steele and his team for not only allowing us to be here today, but taking extra care and attention to ensure that the event is in a venue befitting of what I think is a really important event, and of course the attention they've given us in terms of the way today's gone through. Now, as you know, you can't clap in Parliament. It's against the rules to clap in Parliament, but if you could please give a big hear to the Cairns Convention Centre and their staff. I want to thank Black Star Radio, Win Television News, ABC Radio and Bama Bipra Media and their National Talk Black program for providing some coverage of today's events. It's very exciting that they'll see, and hopefully you'll have a lot of people hearing the broadcast of today's proceedings going out to many other people. I want to thank the Parliamentary Education team, Roylene, Anne-Marie, Kate and Brett, for everything they've done to make today successful. You can give them, please, a big hear. Our Deputy Speakers for today, the member for Hill, Shane Canute, Michael Healy, the member for Cairns, and the Honourable Craig Crawford, the member for Barron River, who had to depart a bit earlier, such as the life of MPs, always on the road, always travelling. But I want to say thank you to them personally, and if you can please give them a big hear for helping with today's proceedings. We also, of course, have some very important people here now. Again, your teachers have helped you and guided you through this process over the weeks leading up to today. It's clear that you've had great help and support from your teachers, and not just for the efforts that they've helped in bringing you here, but also, can I say that, again, you'll look back in many years to come at your teachers and you'll remember them as very, very important people in your life. Sometimes they'll rouse on you, they'll growl you for doing something at school, they might seem like they push you a bit on the odd occasion to get where you need to go. But believe me, you will remember your teachers as some of the most important people and who have helped shape your life. So not just for today, but for all the work that your teachers and your educators do at schools, can you please give them a big hear, hear? Yeah. And finally, this is about you. Thank you, students and participants today, for the work that you've done, the effort that you've put in, and for making, I think, the inaugural Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament a big success. And I hope that we'll be able to bring an event like this back to Cairns at a future stage. I want to say thank you for that effort that you've put in, because it's clear that there's some, not just issues that you wished you could talk about, but there's some issues that, judging by the response from the public gallery, were very real issues. And of course, it was great to hear those having such a positive response. So to all of you students, thank you so much for making this a great success. I thank you very much again, and now declare this Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament closed. Thanks very much.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the students of the 2018 Junior Indigenous Youth Parliament, I would like to thank you for the time you have spent with us today. Students, can we have a hear, hear for Mr. Speaker?